Yeah. So we're going to do a Python talk. It's going to be an open source intelligence gathering talk. And exactly, who am I? So I am Raymond Lilly. I am a student at Eastern Michigan University studying IA. Yeah. I am on the extended stay plan, which means I'll be done in some time. But I am at 37.2 on Twitter. Feel free to spam me with whatever. I don't care. I am also an analyst at a company in Novi doing social media customer relations management. And yeah, so student at Eastern. So what are we talking about? It's the OSINT gathering methods. We have research with implications specifically in social engineering for this talk, but it extends far into marketing stuff and your intelligence world. So we're going to play with Twitter is what we're going to do today. We're going to use Python to do it. We're going to use a module called TweetPy. But before we dive into the actual API stuff and the code, we're going to just take a quick look at some key Twitter concepts. I'm sure we're all familiar, but we'll just go over it real quick. So a tweet, 140 characters. This is awesome because people tweet out everything. It's really short. They really don't think about what they're spending, and they just send it. It's also really concise, so there's a lot of information in a small space. We also have this cool thing on Twitter that allows you to follow people, and this is, I think, their main business model. Allows you to determine who you want to see, whose information is coming to you, and allows other people to say, I want to follow you and see your information. So we'll go over how the friends and followers actually work here. So friends, we're going to look from A's perspective here. A followed B. So A's friend is B. A friend is someone that you choose to follow. Moving on to followers. So this, I love their terminology here because following, friends, followers. Followers, from C's perspective, B followed C. C did not choose to have B follow them. So the person you don't choose is your follower. So if we pull it all together from B's perspective, B's friend is C, B's follower is A. And this gets to be really cool because if you're graphing out groups and organizations and you're wanting to see who's connected to who and who thinks that they're connected to certain people, they define that for you, and it's just out there and it's public data. So you can take a look at any sort of group and organization, see who's talking to each other, who follows who, and you can map out that whole organization really quickly. So how do we do this? We use Twitter's API. It's really cool, dev.twitter.com, and we now have to do this authenticated. About a month ago, Twitter changed their API. You used to be able to do this all unauthenticated. You just send the right URL request, and information comes back. Now you need OAuth tokens. So how hard is that to get? You go dev.twitter.com, and you say, you log in with your regular Twitter account. You say, I want to make an app, and you name it whatever you want, and you say, OK, cool, generate OAuth tokens. Boom, done. And if that's still too difficult for you to actually make requests, you can say, let me go off to the OAuth generator tool for the specific endpoint request I want to make, and it will generate the curl script for you, the command line for curl. You copy and paste that into your machine and just run it. Here comes information back. So we're authenticated now, great. This isn't authenticated to stop you from doing something. This is authenticated so Twitter can actually see what you're doing and who's doing it. That's all they really wanted to say, is they wanted to say, yeah, this user requested this information, so we can market and advertise directly to that user better based on what they're doing. They have two APIs. They have their REST API, which is what we're going to be using, and they have a streaming API. Streaming's cool. You can play with it. You can say, I have this search term, and I want to see everything in real time coming at me on this term. And it actually only returns 1% of them, because it's a lot of information. But it's 1% of all the tweets in real time dealing with whatever search term you put in. You can have that come at you. But specifically the REST API, well, never mind, TweetPy. We won't actually worry about the API directly, the endpoints, because TweetPy is an awesome Python wrapper for Twitter's API. So you can go right into your Python interpreter, import TweetPy, and just start rocking. Path the OAuth tokens, and you're good to go. It's up on github.com/TweetPy. It's written by a guy, Josh the Coder. He's actually been pretty active on the project in the last few months, pulling in new features and updating it for the new API changes and stuff. So it's really starting to pick up speed, and it's really powerful. Anything that I've wanted to do, it's in there already. I've not actually had to extend it at all. If I go and look up the actual API docs and say, how do I actually do this Twitter? There's a method in TweetPy that does that. So the API endpoints we're using, if you were to go to api.twitter.com/status/user timeline, this gives you information specific to users and what they actually tweeted. So it takes a user ID or a screen name. So a screen name would be 37.2, and a user ID would be each user has a 64-bit integer value associated with them. And that's how Twitter actually tracks you across the stuff. So if you were to go on there and you were to have an account, and you're like, I no longer like this name. I want to change it. Twitter says, okay, you change it. But you still have all of your followers, and you still have all your friends, because they're tracking based on that 64-bit ID. So it doesn't really matter if you change your name to get away from someone. If they have that ID, they've got you. You can't change that ID. Get a new account is basically what it is. There's a parameter sense ID, so every user has this ID. Every tweet has this ID as well. So every tweet is atomic, and it's 64-bit ID. So that's the sense ID. You can say, give me every tweet since this particular tweet. So if you were building up a database and you say, this is the last tweet I have in my database, and I want to see everything this person has done since then, user timeline with the option sense ID of that last ID. And here comes everything back at you that you don't have. Count, this is exactly what you'd think. Returns a count, number of tweets to return in the request. You can do up to 200 at a time, and if that's not enough tweets, you can actually add page in there. And with that, you can page up to 16, so you can get 3,200 tweets at a time, basically, in one request, 3,200 tweets. That's the max Twitter will let you grab for one person. If you want further back than that, I don't know how you would do that. It doesn't exist in the API. If there's a Wayback Machine for Twitter, let me know. I'm really interested in that, but I haven't found it yet. Exclude, it should say include, but exclude replies. No, it's exclude replies in this one. So if I don't really care about the conversations that you're having with other people, I just want to see what information you put out specifically, I can exclude all of your replies. So if someone tweeted to you, haha, I went to the ice cream store and they were out of ice cream, and you tweeted back, haha, well, it's not really that interesting. You replied back to their tweet. I don't want that. Throw that away. Allows you to get just the information you posted yourself. Include RTS, that stands for retweets. So if you retweeted someone, by default, that doesn't actually come in this stream from here, but include retweets equals true, boom. You get all the retweets the person did, which, as we go further into some of the stuff, I'll point out why that's a really good idea to do that. But basically, down at the bottom, tweetpy.api.getStatus, and then just the username. That's going to return back 100 tweets for whatever user. Done. Next endpoint, well, go back. Next endpoint, user show. If you wanted to get specific information on a specific user, again, takes the ID or screen name. Really cool thing here is include entities. So you get back tweets, and they're 140 characters, and inside of the tweets are usernames, and there's URLs, and there's hashtags and everything. And you can write some really cool regexes, and you can parse all that stuff out and grab it all, or you can just say include entities, and Twitter will parse it for you. Comes back in the JSON object, and it's awesome. They'll give you the t.co URL, their shortened version. They'll give you what the user actually typed in. They'll give you the HTTP request that they're actually going to send out. And sometimes they even unshorten URL. So if they put like a bit.ly in, sometimes it'll actually resolve that for you. So you don't have to go do that yourself. List out all the hashtags individually. List out all the users that were mentioned in the tweet individually. So you just don't have to really do any work. It's already done for you. And again, it's tweetpy.api.getUser, and returns back all the information on the user. And this is what returns back for a user. This is the JSON object for myself. And there's actually an interesting piece of information in here. If anyone can figure out what sort of operating system I was using when I put up my status, just shout it out. Give you hints in description. Okay, so we've got, if we look in description, we have two characters, /r/n. If I was on a Unix or Linux box, you would just see /n. But because I was on a Windows box, it appended the carriage return character. So you can see just by looking just at my information that I use Windows machines. And again, you have URL, so apparently I still have my LinkedIn up there. Great, connect to me, awesome. Number of followers, friends, how many times listed, when the account was created. So that's in UTC, so that's actually close to, well, I'm not going to do the math right now, but you guys can. We're 5 hours off. They give you the offset, what time zone I'm in, stuff like that. Is the account geo-enabled, so should you be looking for GPS coordinates potentially along with the account? How many times the person has tweeted? Is the account verified, so that's if you had someone like a sports figure, something like that, they could have a verified account, that it's actually them using that account? Well, Twitter's not verified me. I'm not big enough yet. They don't care. So this is the last half of it. It actually returns the last status, and I redacted that information because I didn't ask the person if I could put it up there, who I was talking to, so it's not up there. But you can see a whole bunch of stuff, the background images and colors and stuff. And an interesting point with the background image. So if you have a protected account and I can't see your tweets, I can still see your background image. Just go right to your Twitter page and it's going to show up. It's going to say accounts protected right in the middle, but you still see the background image. So if you were to put personally identifiable information there and I wanted to know what the account was and I couldn't see the actual content you're posting, you've still given me that information. So there's a lot of things in there. Follow requests sent, so like if you were actually going to automate your process of sending out follow requests to people and stuff like that, this would come back if you grab the status had you actually sent out something to them. This is a quick Python code. This is how hard it is to get set up. And the first half of it is all because I'm grabbing API keys from a different location. So importing my consumer key, consumer secret, access token secret, setting up an auth, so auth equals tweetpy OAuth handler with the consumer key, consumer secret, auth set access token, and then I now have Tappy or Twitter API equals tweetpy.api passing in my auth tokens, and now I can just say tappy.getUser37.2 and then say user.screenname, and it starts pumping out information. We've now made a request to Twitter, we're authenticated, anything we want to do, just rock and roll. 350 requests an hour, we're good to go. So it really starts to get really easy and you can just play with Python. And that's as far actually as we're going to go into the Python code with here. We're going to actually start looking at some of the actual things that you can do with this. So there's a method to the madness that we're going to go through. I'm going to talk about the information that was gathered, what you would need to develop the model that I'm going to show. We're going to talk about the specific tools that I used if I used something other than Python. I'm going to explain it and how I used it. We're going to take a look at the visualization that I created and then do a little bit of analysis on it and try to understand what it is that we're actually looking at. So the first one, I wanted to take a look at what is my echo chamber on Twitter, or for anyone. You can target this. You can say, I want to grab JW Gorlick and look to see what his echo chamber is. What sort of, yeah, I'm sorry, calling you out, Wolf. What sort of information would be coming back at this person? What would they be seeing just by sitting there and just using the service? Gives you an idea of what sort of perspective or bias they might have. What sort of information did they choose to see? So I grabbed the last 1,000 tweets of everyone the user followed. In that case, that's me. And just did a basic word count in all the tweets. Straight up word count. Found a list of 5,000 common English words on Google and just excluded those, and then said, here's my list of words. And then I threw it into Wordle.net. So if you've not played with that site, it's really cool. It allows you to take a text document, and it will count all the words in it, and it'll just make a visualization. And it'll look something like this. You can, if you want to do all the work ahead of time and do the word counts, there's an advanced feature, and you can say word, colon, and then a number. And that's the weighting the word gets. So when I ran this against myself, grabbing all the tweets of the people that I followed, security, internet, SANS. So I mean, that's the stuff that people were saying and speaking about that I was seeing. So that was my echo chamber. What's coming back at me? What perspective do I have on stuff? And this can be very telling, depending on who you look at, very telling as to what they're interested in. And I mean, if you're trying to market to them, what products might they be interested in? What are they talking about? What might they be using? Stuff. Even from a social engineering standpoint on that, If I'm talking Cisco ASA all the time, all day, then there's a fair chance that I'm using Cisco ASAs. So if there's a new vulnerability or new exploit for an ASA comes out, or maybe they're using a iron key SSH or with a telnet or something, and there's a new vulnerability that drops and everything's going to be owned, well, you can see if it was up there that I talk about that a lot. So potentially wherever I'm working or in my own environment, I may be vulnerable to something. Looking a little bit a chart that doesn't require as much kind of just diving around and trying to just make sense of the data. Tweets per day. What does the person look like when they tweet over just a week period? If you take all their tweets, so I grabbed the last 3,200 tweets because that's all you can get, and then you plot those just over a week. When are they most active? When are they not active? And I actually did this for an individual and then for a community as well. Individual's last 3,200 tweets. The community was actually interesting. I was playing with the streaming API, seeing what I could do, and I tracked InfoSec over a weekend. So if you tweeted with hashtag InfoSec between May 18th and 21st, it's a 3-day weekend, and I happened to catch the 1% of tweets and you were in that, you're sitting in my database. And I looked you up and plotted the stuff here. But basically all we're doing, plot the tweets over weekdays, and here's what an individual looks like. So we have actually a pretty big bump. This is Sunday through Saturday. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, there's a lot more traffic for this individual than at the beginning of the week. And maybe this individual works a job where they're really focused at the beginning and then they kind of not focus at the end of the week. Maybe there's something in their job where they're traveling a lot at the end of the week. I don't know. But I do know this individual is part of the InfoSec community. So if we look at the community, do they fit? Are they an outlier in the community or do they fit right within the community? And if we look at this is a community for InfoSec, and here's how we tweet. And I thought this was pretty interesting. We have pretty much flat, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, there's a bump in traffic. And so I was sitting there trying to figure this out. And I racked my brain, I'm like, so movies come out on Tuesday nights, and I'm like, what are we doing? It's Patch Tuesday, it's not Patch Thursday. I mean, like, what is going on? Why would we have a bump in traffic there? And so I'll call you out again, Wolfgang, because you had the brilliant idea. Conferences, where are we at right now? And what day is it? We're not at work, we're at a conference, it's a Thursday. I bet you there's a lot more tweeting going on today than if you were sitting at your desk actually working on something. At least that your bosses would hope so. But, and so I think that's what this is. It's the InfoSec community. We have a lot of conferences. We have a lot of travel at the end of the week going to a new location for the next week or something like that. I think that describes that. And since you actually, you have the tweet data itself, you could dive into individual tweets. You could say conferences, and you could dive in and look at the actual conferences and say, okay, that makes sense. There is a rise in conference traffic there, and that kind of describes that, or it does describe that, or no, it doesn't, and let's dive in deeper and find out why. Next thing, what does the person talk about? And hashtags are interesting, because the user defines their own hashtags. They say whatever they want, and it's a way of saying, my tweet fits into this bucket, this little category. This is what I think this says, or I'm trying to be ironic by using this hashtag or something. But it's a way of classification, and the user's doing it for you. So if you look at hashtags, you have a pretty good idea of what the person actually is talking about. So again, last 3,200 tweets, include entities. Again, where I said Twitter will parse all this for you, this is just awesome. They parse it all, you pull it out in the JSON object, you're good to go, you have a list. Again, it's, yeah, hashtag lazy hacker. Not gonna do the work if I don't have to. Include retweets, and we'll actually, I have a slide where I didn't include the retweets, and there's not a lot of information there, because the person actually didn't tweet a lot himself. He didn't tweet a lot himself. He retweeted a lot of information. So if you include retweets, this gets a lot more interesting. And here I'm playing with Google Visualization API. If you do a Google search for code, visualization and playground on Google, there's a nice Ajax environment that you can just start throwing information into and just running it. So this guy that I was looking at, you could probably guess who it is if you wanted to, but here is his topics. Here's what he tweeted about himself. So hashtag NSM, so network security monitoring, BroWS 2011, so that's the conference, APT, security onion. So this guy's probably into network monitoring. He's probably doing some, yeah, APT, that's an interesting one. I think probably in some sort of government-related sector, some sort of incident response, something like that. But this is just his tweets. If we look at what it looks like with retweets, suddenly we have a little bit different picture. He's tweeting more about Security Onion when you include retweets. And now we're starting to get stuff, InfoSec and SigWill and DFIR and stuff. So we're starting to get a good idea of the community this guy has placed himself in just by his hashtags. Moving on to retweets, replies. This gets, again, we're last 3,200 tweets. It's gonna be a same old story. Include entities, include retweets. If you're looking for retweets and you don't include the retweets, you're not gonna get retweets. So it's something, you'll run the code and say, I have nothing, and then you look back and you just didn't define that. So here we're gonna look at 3 different charts. We're gonna look at retweets, replies, and the best time for a response. So this is actually my information. So who do I retweet? And this is a fair bit of people up there. I was surprised by this data. I don't retweet a lot in comparison to the number of tweets I actually send out. Who do I reply to? This gets interesting. We start seeing people that I reply to a lot but didn't show up in the retweets. So I communicate with these people, but I don't send their message on. It gets to be kind of interesting. If you take both charts side by side and you say, who does the person retweet and who do they reply to? Now you've found the important people that are spreading the message that the person agrees with, and they're also communicating with. If you were to try to get, from a social engineering standpoint, the retweets and the replies would be a good spot to look at. If you wanted to send a message to get to the person that you're targeting, who might it come from? If you had the ability to come from someone or spoof someone's account, maybe you take the O out of something to make it a 0 or something. It looks like it came from the right person. It really didn't. But chances are if you pick someone that's high up, the person's going to see it and they're going to respond to it. And then replies broken down over time. This gets interesting from if anyone's ever done any sort of sales and done any sort of like cold call stuff, and you're just like, people aren't answering their phones, they're not at their desks, would be really cool to see when this person would just be most likely just to reply to me. Let me just not waste anyone's time, just call them then. Or when do I need to be back at my desk? Because that's when they're going to reply and they're going to call me back. So I took a look at someone else's information and replies per hour and broke it down. We actually have a bump at about noon. So kind of makes sense. The guy goes on break, goes on lunch, and he gets to reply to people. Then again at the end of the day, 3, 4, 5 o'clock, another reply at 7 o'clock, and then one right before he goes to bed. Some big spikes. So if you were to target an individual and you want a response from them, maybe you would send it the hour before they're the most active. So when they log onto their Twitter account and they look at all the messages that they have sitting right there, you're right near the top. So there's a good chance they actually see your content. Combined with the social engineering stuff of trying to get them to click on something, then maybe you would take from one of those individuals and target a certain time slot to get the most bang for your buck. Instead of just, if you sent a message to this guy at 11 o'clock at night, the earliest he's going to reply looks like 6, 7, 8 a.m. in the morning, and he's probably seen a ton of messages come across through there, and your stuff is just going to be lost in the noise. So that would be really cool. That's the way I would actually schedule that to reply to people. So here we get into something kind of interesting. Can we take influence and can we measure that? And yeah, this would be the time to throw the GrrCON balls. We're going to use Clout to do this. I don't like Clout. They change their algorithm daily. It doesn't make any sense, and they don't tell you what the algorithm is based on. And if you give them a Twitter account, you have so much clout. If you give them a Facebook account, you have so much more clout. So Facebook is more valuable than Twitter. I don't understand why, but they just want information. That's what their company does. They market information to companies. And the more you give them, the more clout people have. But if we take that just as a guideline, we say we don't really care that your algorithm isn't perfect, and that there's probably not someone out there doing better, and we don't want to take the time to actually write our own. You can interface with their API and grab any user and see what sort of clout score they have. And another cool thing that they don't talk about, and I think it's their biggest selling point, is topics. They take a look at what a user's tweeting about or what other people think they're influential about and show topics. And you can grab that through the API. So you could say, if you pulled up Wolfgang, hey, I didn't mention it, you brought it up. So since you did, cats. Right now, Wolfgang's top topic is cats. You can go look it up. I might have bombed that database over a few months and poisoned it, but it's cats. Otherwise, it would have been something more sensible like business or cloud computing, security. But if we take a look at all this stuff and pull it all together, we can do something with all of our last 3,200 tweets, including all the things, adding clout score and topics, and using a formula. Because if I had a clout score of 50 and someone had a clout score of 55, and I just multiplied that by the number of times I interacted with someone, it really doesn't show a big difference. So I squared the clout score. So if we have 50 versus 60, now it's 2,500 versus 3,600. Clout normalizes their data set, and everyone's kind of grouped in towards the middle, and it's all compact in. So I would rather see a more spread out value. Simple squaring makes those values explode. Now we get to come out to the actual video. Let's see if this works. Full screen. Pause. Okay. Let's take this back. So what I did here is I took my last tweets with interactions with people and go away. Okay, there we go. So from when I was active to the present, which was actually August when I generated this chart, and this is using Google's visualization API. If you look up motion chart, it's a nice interface. You just add your data in and it generates this all for you. So you can change the time scales and you can change what your axes are. And the cool thing with topics, and I wish I had a live so we could actually show you, and I'll show it in the video, but it'd be better just to be able to click on stuff. But if we mouse over an individual here, or a little bubble, it actually shows the topic associated with that person. So the people that are higher up and you want to know what topic it was I interacting with at that point in time, you can just hover over the person and it'll pop up. But instead of talk about it, let's actually see what happens. So we have some movement. I think I pause it here in a second and show the topics. Yeah, so you can click on people, see their names, and on the right-hand side, which I'll show back in a second, so as you mouse over someone, the topic would pop up on the right-hand side. And clicking on names allow you to track individuals. So I was interacting with Iron Geek and Miko from F-Secure. And if we see on the right-hand side, we've got the little box where we can select individuals. We can click on that, and you could say, I want to track these individuals throughout the whole thing. It gets to be really kind of neat, and you can track individual people. So there's Radis, and he's influential about podcasts. But yeah, just as we go through, so Wolfgang met him at B-Sides Detroit. So at that time period, he exploded in traffic, and we can see stuff like that. And if you were to correlate this with actual events, so where was the person at, correlating it with the interactions and the frequency, the higher interactions with different individuals, you would actually have a lot of information. So one visualization, we'll go back into the presentation. Clients. So every tweet you send out has a source tag attached to it, and that's what client you used. It could be web, it could be TweetDeck, it could be Twitter for iPhone. Doesn't really matter what it is, but by knowing that information, you glean more information from the person as to how they're actually interacting with stuff. So here I'm taking a look at an individual, grabbed their last 3,200 tweets, and took a look at the total counts for their client usage. Just snapshot, boom, I have the last 3,200, what's the count look like? And then visualized it again over time to see if there's a reason to even play with stuff over time or if it doesn't matter. So looking at this individual, just a snapshot in time. Twitter for iPhone. The guy tweets a lot from his iPhone. So now we know he has an iOS device. That gives us even more information if we were to target him. Web. So cool, everyone uses web. Brizzly. If we look into that client, it no longer exists now, but it used to be an application on an iOS device that allowed you to tie in multiple social media sites all into one thing. So, cool. Twitter for iPad, whole bunch of stuff. Camera on iOS. Cool, we got a lot of information that points to Apple devices for this individual, just by looking at their client usage. Now, if we go back out to a visualization, where are we at here? Client breakdown. I want to take a look at go back to the beginning. So I take a look at, selected all the different clients. I only grabbed the top 3 here because the rest of them were just kind of not really used, so we don't really care about them. But again, visualized them over time. I want you to watch Brizzly. And so right now, his overall usage is dropping down. And then we see a huge spike up in, looks like June, July of last year. It gets even bigger, so he's getting more active. It's coming back down. Web dropped off, so he was using mobile for a while, almost exclusively. Brizzly goes up, comes back down, and here in a second, wait for it, it's gone. He no longer uses it. So if we looked at his chart as a point in time, just the last 3,200 tweets, Brizzly was 3rd on the list. But now, it's no longer relevant to him. He doesn't use it, hasn't used it for the last 3 months. And let's pause that. But the interesting thing there is, as I mentioned, the client no longer exists. It was the developers for AOL Instant Messenger. They made this client, and AOL wanted them to go back and work in AIM again. I don't know why, but they did, so the client disappeared. So if you were to target this individual for a social engineering engagement, maybe you have this really cool application you just built for iOS that allows him to integrate all of his social media sites together into one app. And since he was such a power user for your client before Brizzly, because you're a developer from that team, you're going to give him early access to this information, this client, and now he installs your application on his phone, potentially. I mean, I think that's kind of game over at that point. But we're not done yet. We can keep. Interactions with topics. So I wanted to go back and play with MeltyGo a little bit. And since I'm a student, I don't pay for MeltyGo, so I have Community Edition. So it doesn't allow me to grab the last 3,200 tweets of someone. I can grab the last 12, I think. That's no good. So then there's Casefile. Allows me to import Excel spreadsheets or CSV files. So I can do that with Python. We can take Python, we can go grab all the last 3,200 tweets, including entities again, and we can, and I didn't mention it, but we're using Cloud again for the topics, and we can set up a document that is me, the person I interacted with, and then the topic. Throw that all into Casefile and let MeltyGo visualize that for us. This demonstration actually took me about 5 minutes to code up. It was literally just boom, 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 done. Grab the information, grab the cloud information, throw it together as CSV, import it in MeltyGo, and it visualized it in like 30 seconds. And this is what it looked like. And so I get that you probably can't read the icons right now. Just wanted to give you a full overview of what it is before we zoomed into stuff. And I don't know if we can actually read this or not. I'll pull. Can we read this, or is this too small? Okay, so one person in the front can see it, people in the back can't. We will go over here and we will pull this up. It's the same chart, and we can zoom in and we can see different topics. So we have a big node of information security. So the people that I'm interacting with most on Twitter are all tied to information security. Then we have stuff like music, so I play bass in a band, cool. And we can start moving around and see the different entities on the chart and who I'm interacting with and what they're influential about. Hacking, technology stuff. And to grab this information after the script's written is like 30 seconds. And throw it in MeltyGo, and boom, you have a really good idea of, yes? So actually, this is actual usernames. So if we look at the yellow images and pull in, oh, so this is a good one. So we have HD Moore. At some point, I interacted with HD Moore. So I pulled out the usernames using entities, and Twitter parsed it all for me. And so then we can see, and we can actually follow the line coming off of HD Moore, and we can see that Clout thinks HD Moore is influential about hacking. So pretty accurate in that regard. No, that's actually the Clout topic. So if you were to go on a Clout's website, which, yeah. So it's a site that allows you to define influence of individuals, and that maps out the different topics that they would be influential about. Yeah. Which is really cool, because then I don't actually have to calculate that myself. So if I were to pull out all of their tweets and look at all the information, do some sort of calculation, I could figure this out. And you could do it yourself if you wanted to, if you didn't want to use Clout. But since they have it there, it's already done, just leverage it. And so I played with that. We'll leave Wolfgang alone. Yeah, so I lied, but apparently it closed. Cool. Oh, there it was. So if Python isn't your cup of tea, and you still want to play with this information, there's a really cool website, tweetstats.com. If it's up, which is a crapshoot, it gives you a tremendous amount of information about someone. And I'm not going to go into actually showing it, but it gives you all these chart breakdowns, and pretty much everything that I've done is on TweetStats. TWAP charts, if TweetStats isn't up, you can make do with TWAP charts. It's not as friendly, all the information isn't displayed in one thing. You have to say, I want this specific thing, click on it, and give it a username, and it generates that specific thing. Again, Clout is what I was playing with. There's another site, a competitor to Clout, Cred, run by, I think, PeopleSoft. It's a cool site if you're just wanting to footprint someone. They give you a lot more information about the actual things that they tweeted or the actual messages that they posted and who they interacted with. It's a lot more friendly in that regard. But I think their scoring mechanism is crap in comparison to Clout. Sorry if you like Cred, but it's not as great. Social Mention. So it's an interesting site. You can go to it and you can type in whatever you want, and it'll show you all the social media stuff that's talking about that topic. So if you put in a username or you put in a name, there's the potential you have some really interesting stuff come back where it crawled YouTube and it crawled Facebook and crawled Twitter and stuff and grabs a whole bunch of information and brings it back to you. There's the potential. I put it at the bottom because it's not very accurate. You really have to sort through it, but maybe there's a nugget of gold in there. If you're not a fan of MeltyGo for your visualization stuff, Network X, playing back into the Python stuff, you can define your own graphs based on nodes and your edges. And a really cool thing with that is MeltyGo collapses all your entities in together. To make that chart, it didn't take into account interactions. So if we looked at the number of retweets and replies that I had, we would see Wolfgang was huge. But if we go back to the MeltyGo chart, Wolfgang is actually going to be the same size as everyone else, because he doesn't have that many things coming into him, links, because he only had me and then the topic. So he's the same weight as everyone else. So if you were to play with Network X, you would define the weight of the node or the weight of the edge, and you could actually show interactions with topics. And so music looked like a big topic for me. I really don't interact on Twitter with that at all. That's apparently some of the people I do interact with do talk about that, and they're influential about that. And there's enough of them, but I really don't do anything with that. So that's kind of a misnomer on that chart. But if you were to do a weighting of the interactions, then with the topics, you would have a lot more information, pertinent information about the individual. So that's pretty much it. That is my contact information. Student at Eastern, email me with any questions or ideas you have afterwards. Otherwise, I'll take questions now about anything. Go ahead. All right. Yes. No. So I haven't played with anything else, but every other social media site on the internet has APIs that you can pull into. I know Facebook is pretty wide open. If you wanted to go grab Facebook data for people and their interactions, unless the users have locked it down, and this is the case here too with Twitter. Unless the users have locked it down, it's out there, it's public information. You could grab all that, and you could add that in to have a bigger, fuller picture. So where's this going? What's the implications? So this started out as a project of just what is out there, what can I find? But from an audit standpoint, or you're wanting to know what your users are talking about, or maybe you think maybe your users are leaking your IP out there, and you want to know, are they talking on Twitter about your different things and the designs and stuff that what you're doing? You could really easily use something like TweetPie, and you could grab that information. And this would give you a good idea. If they're talking about a lot, it would pop right up. It becomes very domain specific as to how you'd actually utilize this. But it's really, at this point, it's a data mining, data exploration thing, and figure it out from there. What's? Oh, so the Python module? TweetPie. No. Maybe. I haven't decided on that yet. Realizing it's all public information, yes, it probably should just be open because you could grab this information yourself. But open sourcing all that stuff and making the tools that make stuff like this possible raises the bar for everyone, whether they want it to or not. So maybe we can talk afterwards. But right now it's not on GitHub. And if I do decide to, it'll be 37.2.github. Actually, the Clout one, interaction with Clout and interactions, that is actually up on GitHub, that specific one. But otherwise, most of them are not. That's the one that's up on GitHub. So follow Fridays on Twitter, #FF. If you're not familiar with it, you go on every Friday and you can go on there and you can say, these are the cool people that I follow and I think you should follow them too. So I got tired of picking and choosing. It felt like I was picking favorites. So I said, if I grab the last 3,200 tweets of myself, look at just the last month's worth of data, and then if I interacted with you a lot, then you're on Follow Friday. If you can fit in the top 2 tweets, or if I only want to send out 2 tweets, if you fit in there, then great, based on your interaction score alone. So if you don't interact with me a lot, or I don't interact with you, then you're not going on Follow Friday. But if we interact a ton, well then you're going to be right up there. So it's automated, it's just a script that just runs, and I no longer have to worry about that. And when people whine and complain, I'm like, hey, it's not my fault, it's your fault. So. All right, I think we're good to go.